9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Discussing everything about the afterlife and spirit world. Coming to you all the way from Ireland, it's Sandie Byrne.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Life After Life with me, Sandie Byrne. And in today's episode I have joining me from London, England, Ann Théato. Am I pronouncing your name right, Ann?
That's very good, actually, Sandie, because it's not easy to pronounce. It's Ann Théato, but very well done so far.
Thank you very much. So, Ann, I was actually a guest on Ann's podcast. She has her own psychic podcast as well, which I will link in the description box attached. And so I have asked her to come back onto mine because I love hearing people's stories. People may have gathered that from previous episodes because I always start by asking people about their background. And Ann also comes from Tipperary. It is Tipperary you're originally from, Ann, isn't it?
Yeah, my mother is from Tipperary. She's from Nina, so... Yeah.
Okay. Shane MacGowan country, which is very topical at the moment.
That's right. I did watch that whole funeral unfold on the television. I was mesmerised. I thought it was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah, it was something different. But as I was saying to my husband, I was saying it was lovely. But like when I'm organising funerals for family members and I'm asking, can we sing this song? They're like, no, because it's not a hymn. And then you have Shane MacGowan's funeral and they've got all kinds of rock stars in singing whatever. So it really depends on the parish priest, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah. And how much autonomy we have as individuals to allow an expression of that person to unfold. It just depends, doesn't it? So I imagine it's probably a little bit more difficult in Ireland.
Yeah. Well, generally, but they seem to have had a fairly good priest anyway for the funeral.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about you. Okay, so can we start by asking, if it's not too personal, about your background? Okay, did you what did you work at before? Did you always have a connection to spirit? How did it happen for you? Because, sorry now, and I will let you talk, I promise, but it's so nice for people to hear that, you and I, that we haven't been just, working as psychic mediums all our lives, that we did have a life before this.
Yes, that's right. And it's really important because that life before being a psychic or a medium, it helps the gift unfold, I think. Yeah. So interesting things I have not revealed about myself yet on other interviews are that I was once upon a time a motorcycle courier in London for 3 years. Yeah, it was my favourite job ever, and I used to drive around London. I got to know it very, very well. Delivering parcels to various different companies from one part of London to the other part of London. I did it for 3 years and then I stopped because I just couldn't face another winter in the cold and the rain on the motorbike. But I've done other jobs. I've been a singing Victorian flower girl, Sandie, in Covent Garden Market selling posies of flowers to tourists. I've worked in bars and restaurants. A lot of my jobs were working as a personal assistant. So I've done a lot of administrative work as well, which is what I trained in. See, when I left school, I wanted to be an actor. That was where I wanted to head, but my mother wouldn't let me. She was very strict and still is, actually, at the age of 90. Irish mothers can be, I'm sure you understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I left school and I went to secretarial college. That's what it was suggested to me. It's not something I wanted to do at all, but that's what I went and did. And I went to be a medical secretary to support teams of doctors, dentists, etc., etc. And I actually really enjoyed that work for a while. And then I left to become an actress and a motorcycle courier and a voice artist. And I set up my own theatre company and my own charity teaching drama to children, and eventually moved into, after having children, I moved into the work of being a psychic and a medium. That was the sort of journey.
Catalyst.
Yeah. So, but I haven't, in terms of where this gift came from and how that unfolded, Sandie, as a child, looking back, didn't really think anything of it. But as a child, I had experiences of seeing spirit people on the streets outside. That was not necessarily in the house or anything as a child, but I also had a very, very strong psychic knowing, and I couldn't really understand what that was. I just accepted it. I would know who I might see on the way to school that day. I would know what the score would be in a football match, things like that, little small things. But it sort of registered that I've got this kind of strange thing I can do. And of course I didn't dare talk about it because I was brought up in a family with 4 brothers, and you just get punched if you said anything out of the ordinary. So I didn't say anything at all. And of course it was a very strict Catholic family, and it wasn't really a topic of conversation, or it was in the days where my mother would take the wooden spoon out and clatter you around the back of the legs if you dared to. Oh yes. Yeah. So we'd be kind of, I wasn't scared of her. I didn't have a childhood of fear and trepidation, but I certainly respected the wooden spoon. So
100%. Yeah, all my mother had to do was put her hand anywhere near the drawer, and you would run.
You'd absolutely run. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So tell me, because that's really interesting that you kind of moved towards it after becoming a mother. Do you feel that your intuition maybe grew after that?
That's such a good question, isn't it? Yes, I think it did. In fairness, I think it did. I think it was always growing, because I bought my first packet of tarot cards at the age of 17. So I was doing psychic readings for everybody since the age of 17. Friends, family, anyone who'd just sit down. I was fascinated by it. And the results that came alongside it. So I've always been doing psychic readings, and then what happened? Yeah, I started to see spirit people, and then my children were born, and then it really kicked off actually. When my son was 3 or 4, then I started seeing spirit people in the house. Now, when I say I started seeing spirit people, Sandie, I think for everyone listening, I think it's really important to know I'm not seeing a whole outline of a whole person suddenly manifest in the space. That's not what it was. It was seeing the shadow of a hand go past my face, or somebody's legs just walking out of sight, and I'm like, is that my... Because I wear glasses. Not today, I've got my contact lenses in, but if you wear glasses, there's a slight displacement out of the side of your glasses, and you're wondering whether that's just a shadow or the way the lights changed. But it became obvious that was not it when my children started seeing them as well. So then I got a little nervous, Sandie. So I was like, what is this? And why is this happening in this house? Because as a mum, you will understand, and parents who are listening, or even people who aren't parents who just have a huge love and protection for children, you want to nurture them, you want to look out for them. All of your being cries out to keep them safe. And so when unusual things start to happen, you need to take some steps to find out what that is. And that's the position I found myself in.
Yeah. I love that. And I do think that there is a catalyst sometimes. A lot of people would say, I always felt spirit, or, I had this intuition about what was going to happen. But I always feel, and, I've been over to the Arthur Findlay College in London several times, and, you meet a lot of spiritual people there, obviously. And, in talking to a lot of people, there was something that brought people back to it. Okay, back to maybe, a stronger sense of it, or looking into it. Now, maybe it's a time thing, and especially with Irish people, because, we had the Catholic thing going on, and you didn't talk about seeing dead people and all that kind of stuff. But, for me, and I do numerology as well. And when I looked at my numerology, it actually said that, I wouldn't work with my gifts or abilities until I was, in my 30s, and I would have to change my name. And it was after I got married and changed my name from Ryan to Byrne that everything started to happen. It just made it wasn't that I wasn't able to before, but I don't know, I think it gave it that edge that I was able to do it for other people. And, you know, you as a psychic medium, and you teach it, which I want to talk about as well. But isn't that an important distinction to make, that everybody has the ability to communicate with spirit? Not everybody has the empathy to do it for other people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely think I keep changing my mind about this a little bit as well, because I was used to think to myself, look, we all speak the language of the soul because we're all eternal soul beings. Therefore, how can we not communicate with the spirit world? How can any living human being not be able to communicate with the spirit world when they're already spirit incarnate? Sure. So that was my thing for a while. But recently, and then I used to get annoyed with the phrase, I can't remember what it is now. Everyone is psychic, but not everyone is a medium. Oh, I don't know what that silly phrase is, but it used to drive me insane just thinking it just didn't make sense. However, as I'm evolving, because we're always evolving with our mediumship, I'm now wondering, is everybody mediumistic? I'm not sure that they are. I think everybody, to a certain extent, has a huge sensitivity, but whether or not it's wise for you to go into mediumship, it may not be if you're of a certain mental state. If things are too difficult for you in the living world, it might not be quite the right thing for you. You shouldn't do it. Maybe some people have got a natural talent for it, Sandie. Some people that I meet are just like, you just sit there going, how on earth do you have this amazing talent? It's astonishing. So yeah, it just depends. I think I'm going off track with your question though.
You're absolutely fine. Now I was asking about, you know, can everybody read for other people? And I totally get what you're saying about not everybody maybe being a medium. But I don't know, and it's something that I ask. I hadn't done any live events in the last 4 years, and I did one there not so long ago. And you know, I always ask the audience, has anybody ever, you know, smelled their grandmother's perfume or their grandfather's pipe or, you know, heard footsteps on the stairs, you know, this kind of thing. And it turns out that the majority of people have. So the connection or the ability is there, whether or not they choose to develop it. Now, that's just in my own experience. You know, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that, because all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life with levels of belief have experienced paranormal activity that they can't explain. We can explain it because we've had the training and we understand what it is. I've certainly I remember very distinctly being in America, I was working over there, and I was just around to dinner at a lady's house, and then suddenly the whole room filled with the smell of tobacco, strong tobacco, and everyone smelled it, not just me because I've got the psychic ability to smell it, you know, gustantly, but everybody experienced that in the space, and I found that really beautiful. So yes, I think everybody can. But of course, we're all talented to different degrees. And you might be like me. I wasn't a naturally born medium. I had to work. I had to develop it. I had to train. I've had to really, really practice and practice and practice and practice to get my skills up. So it just depends. Some people don't be put off, is what I want to say to you. If you've got a few little twinkles of things going on, but you're wondering if you've got the ability, yes, go and explore it and see. Go and get some training and see how far you can take it, because it's definitely something you can develop, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. And I suppose I would be the other spectrum from that. And I do think that I'm very lucky because I come from a family of readers. So, you know, while I wouldn't say it was encouraged, do you see this, do you see that? When I did talk about seeing stuff as a child, it was always welcomed and it was, you know, treated like normal, you know, because, you know, everybody knew what I was experiencing. But I do know that not everybody has had that same background. So, yes, I totally get it that they have to work. I'm just too lazy to work for it. I'll be honest, I'm a lazy person. But, you know, you do teach mediumship a lot, you know, and you help people get started, you know, with their mediumship journey. So generally when people get in contact with you, what's their question? Do they say, I think I see spirit, or I'd like to become a medium, or, you know, what's the approach? Like, who comes to you?
In general, Sandie, most people have had a few little things happen and they want to explore what that is. People don't understand initially what is the difference between being a psychic and being a medium. They don't understand why you need to develop both of those faculties. And so the classes that I teach will educate people so they will understand what their psychic sense is and how they can use it, and they will understand what mediumship is and how they can use and develop that mediumistic faculty as well. People come for all kinds of different reasons. Some people come because they've lost a loved one and they want to understand how to communicate with that person themselves without having to constantly go to a medium. Some people come because they've just got a little interest in it. Some people come because they've got a huge ego and they want to be the television medium and all. They want to give those messages. Those people don't tend to stick around very long because they don't understand this is a long process. You don't learn it overnight. So, but most people have just got this beautiful line of inquiry, and I really like to encourage people to try out various different exercises, Sandie, you know, and to see people get instant success and instant results and be amazed by it is just such a beautiful thing to experience. So yeah, all kinds of different people, really.
Yeah, it is, and it's such a lovely feeling when someone surprises themselves, you know, when you're practicing on somebody else or whatever, and then someone says to them, that's right. They're like, oh, I did it. I could do this, you know, and it opens the floodgates then, doesn't it? Then they start experiencing things all over the place. And I did meet a guy once, actually, when I was on a course in London, and you know, he said, you know, at the end of the week, he stood up in front of everybody and he said, look, I have to be honest. He said, I came here because I needed a job and I wanted to earn money. And it was my perception that, you know, mediums earn a lot of money. He said, but having spent the week here, with you, he says, I'm a true believer now, he said, and I will be looking into this more, you know. So it's lovely to actually bring people, you know, to their understanding. You know, a lot of people see it as a grift, and I'm sure you get accused of, you know, taking advantage of vulnerable people and all that. You know, there's a lot of people that are skeptical and vocally skeptical rather than just letting us do what we do best. So, I totally get that. And there's very few, and there's no difference between the medium on the telly and the medium that just works at home or online or whatever it is. You know, it's just that somebody got lucky, they were in the right place at the right time. You can get very, very good mediums who haven't been on the television. And I actually think it was Tony Stockwell that said that to me once, you know. It was just being lucky in the right place at the right time. He got on television. You know, there are other very good mediums. And you work a lot with Tony, don't you? You teach in his soul space?
Yes, that's right. I do work alongside Tony. Well, not alongside him necessarily. I've been helping him with his administration for a great many years now, at least 8 years. And but also I do teach alongside him from time to time when invited to do so. So, and that's always an absolute privilege to be able to work alongside somebody so talented and gifted, and the classes are always magical when you teach with Tony. So I did some courses with Tony as well in the past, and you know, he's got a way of teaching and explaining things that just make sense to me. So you know, I really I love listening to him talk about the whole spirit thing. So I suppose if we go back to your story, because we keep getting I keep going off on tangents anyway. If we go back to your story, so I get that you were, you know, experiencing more after becoming a parent, but this was something, you know, that you had an inkling of anyway, you know, even in your early life. But so what did you do about it? You know, you had young kids, you were doing admin work, you know, like what did you do about these feelings? Where did you go? Who did you speak to? Yeah, well, it was a very difficult time, Sandie. I have to say, I was a single parent with 2 children from 2 different fathers. Both fathers had disappeared. Both sets of families behind those fathers had disappeared. My own family had disowned me because I had 2 children outside of marriage. Yeah, it was a very, very hard. And I was on my own in London, and there was no support. There was no community to leave the children with. There was nothing. I remember once even having to go with my daughter, who was sick. She was only a little baby, about 3 years old, and I had to get my son out of bed as well and take them both wrapped in blankets to the pharmacy to get some medicine. It was mad times, really mad times. Yeah, it was really hard. So it's interesting. It's one of the reasons that I've set up my own podcast, actually, was because of what happened to me with those experiences. So I couldn't, all of this was going on, the psychic experiences, the spirit people in the house, but I couldn't get to a class because A, I had absolutely no money whatsoever, and B, I had no way of getting away from the children, nobody to look after them or take them. And even if I could go to a class, I couldn't have been able to afford even the train fare or the bus fare to get there. So, and there was no internet. You must understand, I know it sounds almost impossible to believe, but there was no internet. There was... Yeah, there was no classes online. There was no podcasts. There was nothing to listen to. The only way you could learn is get a book, which I couldn't afford, or go to a library. So I did borrow some books from the wonderful College of Psychic Studies in London. I joined as a member, and then I could borrow their library books, which was fabulous. So that was one of the ways I started to learn. And then eventually... well, it's all very interesting. I must have got out once, right? I must have gone out once with a friend to a pub because something very extraordinary happened, Sandie. Yep. I was in London and we were just having a drink, as you do, and someone must have had the children at home, God knows who. And a gentleman came up to me and he said, "Hello." I said, "Hello." I thought, oh, here we go. Oh, my gosh, he's going to chat me up and ask me if I want a drink, which I don't. And he said, "Can I just say something to you?" I said, "Yes." "Well, what is it?" He said, "You are a medium and you need to go and train." And I said, "Pardon?" It was the most extraordinary thing. And I said, "What do you mean? How do you know?" He said, "I can sense it in you. I'm the 7th son of a 7th son of a psychic, myself and a medium, and you need to go and train. Have you ever heard of Tony Stockwell?" I said, "Never heard of him." He said, "Well, look him up and go and train with him." So... And then he said, "Right, I've got to go now. Nice meeting you. Goodbye." And I often think, I wonder if that was some sort of earth angel who came in to deliver that 100%. To me. Honestly, it was so extraordinary. Off he went with his friend. And then the next thing I know, I'm looking up Tony Stockwell. And I realise he's this very, very famous UK leading medium. And he does readings at the College of Psychic Studies. So I phoned up to try to get an appointment. He had a 6-month waiting list. And I thought to myself, if Tony tells me I'm a psychic and a medium, then I'll believe him. But otherwise, I'm not going to believe some rando in a bar. So he had a 6-month waiting list and they weren't taking any more people on the waiting list. So I just thought, oh, goodness, what shall I do now? So there was a open day at the College of Psychic Studies in Kensington in London. So I went to the open day and there was a raffle going on and I couldn't afford any raffle tickets. It sounds awful, but this is my life. And I couldn't afford tickets. So, and this woman kept shaking a tin under my nose. Raffle tickets, raffle tickets. I'm like, no, you're okay. I never win a raffle anyway, so I thought I'm not wasting my pound. And she said, "Right, we're closing a raffle now. What would you like a raffle ticket?" And I thought, I can't say no. It's embarrassing now. So I said, "Okay, then, thank you." So I grabbed my little pound. I hoped I'd put in the laundrette for my washing when I got home. Gave her the pound, and I won a prize. All the prizes had gone. There was one left on the table. What was it? A private reading with Tony Stockwell.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yep. It's incredible. So I go to this reading with Tony Stockwell. He gives me a fabulous reading. I didn't actually have anyone in the spirit world at the time. And he gave me a psychic reading about things that were going on with my children, with 2 different fathers and this and that and the other and blah, blah, blah. He said, "I see you here in this college." This was 25 4 years ago, Sandie. I see you here in this college. He said, I don't know how, but I see you within this building, and of course, now I am a teacher at the College of Psychic Studies myself. And I'm also Tony Stockwell's assistant. I became his assistant somehow. How did that happen? That was by going to his classes and courses. Goodness knows, how did I get there? Don't know. Something must have happened. I used to go for weekends. That's it. He had a centre in Billericay, which wasn't so far from me. And I was doing voiceover work. That's right. I managed to get a little bit of voiceover work, which paid very, very well, Sandie. And then because of that, I had a little bit of extra money. And then I could invest in my training. So I used to go for a weekend to Tony. I'd drive up on a Saturday, come back to London, drive up on a Sunday, come back to London. And it was great. And that's how I started to train. And he noticed that I was somebody who took an awful lot of notes. And then he asked me to note some things down and write him a handout and do a couple of things. And then it sort of just evolved into me helping him on a more permanent basis. Yeah, so fabulous story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like just the £1 lottery or raffle ticket,
Yeah.
Oh my God, pity it wasn't a 25 million euro lottery ticket. But anyway, there you go.
That would have been nice. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you this now, and it's just, from the Irish point of view, because we don't really, put much emphasis on certifications over here.
Yes.
But it's a huge thing in the UK, isn't it?
Yes.
There's different CSNUs, or I don't know what they are. But it
Yes.
seems to be very important. And I know that you have some, and, obviously, I'm not saying it's not worth anything. But I'm just wondering, for you, what would be the difference if someone was booking a medium, if they have this certification or if they don't have this certification?
Yeah, again, a wonderful question, Sandie. When I first started out, I didn't see any point in getting a qualification. I was on the understanding that you can either, go and do your training privately and in these open classes, anybody can go, and learn how to be a medium. You absolutely do not need any accreditation, and that is a fact. However, I started to suddenly think, well, hang on a minute, what is this? And there's nowhere that you can go to that will qualify you. It's the only place. The Spiritualists National Union, shortened to SNU, that's the only place you can go to get recognised training and qualifications. Now, I set my mind for some reason, don't ask me why, it just seems to be what I set my mind on, being a tutor at the Arthur Findlay College one day. So in order to get there, you have to have certain amounts of training. So that was one reason for entering the SNU accreditation scheme. But my second reason was, and more importantly really, was I don't know, or didn't at the time, know what the Spiritualists National Union stood for. I didn't know what these qualifications were or what I was going to learn. But what I've discovered is by doing this training, I've learned about pioneers of mediumship, men and women who were mediums back in the 1800s, 1700s, 1900s, and onwards. I've learned about their lives and what they went through and who they were and why we all stand upon their shoulders now. And I learned about the structure of the Spiritualist National Union, who they are. They're this religious organisation. And basically, through the training, they've taught me about mediumship, how to use it, how to use the psychic mind, how to be very clear that spiritualism, or when you're demonstrating mediumship in a spiritualist church belonging to the Spiritualist National Union, you must simply stand up there and deliver your demonstration of mediumship without the use of tarot cards, tools, flowers, anything like this. Even though we both know, Sandie, that you can most definitely use a tarot card to blend into the character within the tarot card and feel who is with you in the spirit world. You can certainly communicate with spirit like that. You can certainly communicate with spirit by working with a flower, with looking at the flower, feeling into the energy and the essence of the flower, and then bringing forward a lady who comes to mind who feels very like the flower, maybe the spikes on the flower. Oh, she's got a very spiky personality. Who am I with? You can move into your mediumship that way. However, with the Spiritualist National Union, they want to be very clear that you don't need to have any sort of prop or gimmick or item. Mediumship is very straightforward, and it basically what they're trying to do is show that there is no there's no fraud involved. It's purely mental mediumship, and this is what it is. So you don't need any of those things. So I would not have learned any of this stuff had I not gone down this route of training. I've done now they've got all funny little names, SD2 and SD4 and SD3. I don't even know what it stands for. The PAS, I know what that stands for, Platform Accreditation Scheme. And what that was, Sandie, was you had to do 25 demonstrations of mediumship physically in a spiritualist church to demonstrate you have to be able to give an inspirational address. They would teach you how to use your mediumship inspirationally, so that spirit moved close to you with that beautiful blend with the spirit world, that you might be inspired to speak words of guidance and inspiration to your audience. So things like that I would never have been able to develop as much as I have done. So now I've got my certificate of the Spiritualist National Union, which is a very highly acclaimed, accredited qualification. And now I've got my CSNUT, and I'm now working towards my diploma, so I will be a DSNU. So that is something like 80,000 words that you have to write. And then you have to demonstrate your mediumship is at a level when you demonstrate that you can really get the evidence, names and detail, whereas maybe your CSNU is perhaps a little level below that. So yeah, it's intense. It's so intense. I can't tell you.
It is intense, and like you, I suppose I've always felt, what's the point, for me, and it's probably something that I will never do. And only because, not that it's not worthwhile. I mean, obviously it's very intensive and you learn so much from it. But I suppose I've always felt that I've learned mediumship from my grandmother. Yes. And, that, because there are some like little rules and stuff, that you have to follow when you're doing certain things with the Spiritualist Union, There was I was on a course one time and we were doing seances, and you could only do them, in the light, and they wouldn't let you do them in the dark, and, things like this. So, for some people it will be absolutely worth it. For some people, they won't necessarily feel the benefit of it. I think it's a very personal decision. But isn't it great to have the resources? Because you know what it's like in Ireland, there are no resources. There's no churches or, spiritualist unions or anything like that,
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's really helped my general knowledge about mediumship and psychic development. And that has fed into my teaching. So that's been for me a real benefit. And also they go through ethics and UK law and things like that, so we have to obviously we're governed by UK law, so all kinds of things like that. But you're absolutely right, Sandie, it's a choice. It's available for those who want it, but for those who don't, it's just as valid, equally so, to not have a single qualification and to use your natural gifts in the way that they unfold for you. So yeah, either camp, it doesn't matter, whatever you feel you want to do.
100%. And I love that you said you set yourself a goal, you want to teach at the Arthur Findlay College, but you still teach. You teach, is your school called Class? Did I see that?
Yes, that's right. The Centre for Learning and Spiritual Studies or something. Centre for Learning and Spiritual Studies. Yeah, that's it. Ann Théato's class. It's just like, oh, come to class. That's right. So I teach all kinds of different things. I'm starting up a development circle, if anybody's interested, in January to learn the difference between psychic and mediumship and put them both together. And my development circle is always so much fun. I always like to put really, really fun exercises in there and nothing too heavy and deep. So that starts in January, and it's an 8-week course every single Friday. So if anybody's interested in that, do come along. But I teach all kinds of different topics, Sandie. I teach remote viewing. I teach psychometry. I teach all kinds of different stuff, all kinds of
And is that in person or online?
Everything's online. Everything is online. Although I have got a couple of courses booked. A couple of one-day workshops booked with the College of Psychic Studies next year, one of which is interestingly called Unleash Your Mediumship. And I've created that course specifically because I've gone down the SNU route, and your mediumship has to be a certain way for the accreditation. But I also feel there's lots of room to play with your mediumship. So that is a specific course that's nothing to do with the SNU or anything like that. It's just for us to really explore being with the spirit world, experiencing the different clear senses, your taste, your smell, your sight, your clear knowing, your clear feeling. So there's a couple of in-person ones, but you'd have to be in London for that, though, guys. That's the only thing. But otherwise, I'm teaching online with the College of Psychic Studies as well. So, and there's going to be a whole series of different classes coming out. I'm releasing this year some downloadable classes so people can learn in their own time. So there's going to be, I've actually got a class which I've written, which is so, I'm blowing my own trumpet here a little bit, but it's brilliant. It's called The Royal Court. Sandie, when I first started reading the tarot cards, I didn't understand the court cards. I just didn't know what the king or the queen or the knight or the page stood for. So much so, I took them out of my tarot pack and put them in the drawer. Didn't even read with them, couldn't cope with them. So again, for that reason, I've created this whole course about the royal court, who they are, what their jobs are, what does a knight do, what is a king, what is a queen, what do they stand for? And it goes into the history of medieval royalty, I suppose, and gives you a sort of foundation as a springboard for your readings when you come to use them in the tarot. So that's coming out next year. But yeah,
and I should probably do something like that, because I have no idea what the tarot cards mean. You know, the wands, the pentacles, any of those. I just read them intuitively. I've never even read a book on tarot. Yes. So, you know, so, and that's okay too, you know.
Of course.
That's absolutely fine too. But yeah, I should really do a course like that where I actually learn what they mean. I'd probably get more from it.
I wonder, because it's just so valid. Because it's interesting you say that, Sandie. When I started with the tarot, I had the manual. We're all cemented to the tarot manual. Oh, what does it mean? Oh, what does it mean? And it comes up in a reading and you're looking it up. I mean, it's a silly way to read. But now I don't need the tarot cards at all. I just tune into somebody's energy intuitively. But if I do use a tarot card, kind of not really looking at the meaning of it like you read. You're looking at the colours and the shapes and the way it makes you feel them. What direction is this person in the tarot standing? Or what are they looking at? What's behind them? Where have they just come from? What are the feelings that they carry with them, where they're feeling in this moment? What are they looking towards doing in the future? So it's that intuitive way of reading, which is beautiful and much freer. It's a freer way of reading than learning the tarot. So
yeah, absolutely. I don't have the patience for learning. But I love that you know, you just validate that, because I was starting to think, oh God, maybe I'm maybe I'm not good at all. But no, it is great, and you know, and people should, you know, I always say to people, and you know, you can tell me what you think on this, you know, when they ring me up and they say, are you any good? You know, I say you should look at all readers, and you should see who you feel drawn to. Yes. You know, yes, there can be testimonials online or whatever, but you have to look at someone's, and thankfully we have the internet now. You should look at someone's YouTube, Facebook, you know, website, whatever, and see who you feel particularly drawn to. Would you agree with that? I
totally agree with that. Most definitely. Yeah. there's lots of mediums out there, there's lots of psychics out there, and I suppose it could be quite overwhelming for someone when they're trying to choose who they want to have a reading with, because you've only got money, you can only spend it once, you want to spend it with the right person. So that's the best way to decide. Read their testimonies and their testimonials and things and their reviews, and see how it sits with you, and really feel, the best way to do it is feel into your solar plexus, just below your belly button almost. Does that make you feel happy when you look at that person's photograph and think about sitting in front of them for a reading? Or does it make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you don't know why? In which case, move on, have a look for somebody else. That's it's got to make you feel really good when you sit with that person. But I think it's important to understand as well, you might have, with the best will in the world, done all your research to sit in front of your psychic or your medium, but it's only going to be what it's going to be in that moment. It will depend on the energy between you and your psychic or your medium. Is going to depend on your mood, what you bring as the sitter to that, or as the recipient to that meeting. It's going to depend on your openness, your relaxation, to be part of the reading as well, and not sit there with your arms folded saying, come on, impress me. Because if you're not invested energetically in the process yourself, it's much more difficult for the medium to work. So, and also I think you have to bear in mind, when you go for a psychic reading, the first few things you might be told might be so insignificant, you're probably thinking, oh, this is a bit rubbish, why are they telling me that? But it's just so that it can get into the energy of you, that they can feel into you. They state a few little things that are just, oh, I feel like you're a little bit low today, or have you got a pain in your shoulder, or oh, I think you've just come from the supermarket. I see, and then you're probably thinking, and get to the nitty gritty.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's just a way of beginning. Yeah,
it's like when you ask about the weather at the beginning of a conversation. It's just an in, isn't it?
It's
to get
just
you to relax. Yeah,
yes,
exactly. Before I let you go, Anne, I wanted to just ask you a little bit about, because you are working in the UK and you have something called the Witchcraft Act in the UK. And it kind of governs, one thing that that always stood out to me is because I use psychometry sometimes. I used to use it more, I guess, in in-person readings. But psychometry is where you can hold an object or a photograph, or, you take energy from a physical thing. But under the Witchcraft Act, you're not allowed to do that. You kind of have to hold it, but then put it down before you relay information to somebody. Okay, so there is this Witchcraft Act. And I suppose my question was, how restrictive do you find it?
Well, that's interesting. I've not heard of it being used in that way. I know the Witchcraft Act has been replaced with the, oh my goodness, I should know this. It should be on the tip of my tongue.
That's fine. It's legislation.
The Fraudulent Mediums Act, something like this.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and so basically what that means is, oh my gosh, I'm being tested now, aren't I? I should know what all these things are. But basically it just means you can't provide goods. It's to prevent fraud and not to provide goods and services that are fraudulent in their means. I don't find it restrictive in the slightest. The only thing in the UK that you have to state is that this reading, by law, I have to state it's for entertainment purposes only. That's a legal requirement. Other than that, you can do whatever you want in your readings. Yeah.
That's great that they've updated it, because it was kind of archaic, and just that whole thought of having to remember to put down the item, because in my early days of reading for people, I was so nervous, so if they gave me something to hold, I literally, held it so tightly for the whole of the reading, because it was like my lifeline to this energy.
Yes.
But one thing that I do now, and maybe it's kind of the same thing, so sometimes if I find it hard to connect to a spirit, and people won't see it because it's on screen, but I'll put my hand out beside me and I'll ask the spirit to hold my hand, just so that I'm getting their energy. So it's kind of still the same thing, although it's not a physical item. But it's just psychometry, I guess, isn't it? Yeah, still psychometry.
That's beautiful. That's such a lovely thing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm sitting here holding hands with somebody's loved one. when I'm talking
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah, that's really, really nice. It's so nice. Psychometry is great. I just wrote a paper about it today. Ugh.
Way. Oh my goodness. You see, I wouldn't have the patience for writing papers at all. So I definitely leave that to you, Anne. But thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, because, you know, as I said at the beginning, you know, it really, people, I think, have this idea of us, you know, mediums, that we've spent our whole lives, you know, reading spirit, reading for people, whatever. But, you know, we haven't. And, you know, we've had, as, do we want to call it, normal lives, you know, before we started reading for people. You know, so it's important that people understand this. And, you know, another thing, and another medium in the UK, I'm trying to think of her name. I'm just so bad with names. TJ Higgs. God, she's amazing. But I remember her saying to me once, you know, that life experience is so much that even, like, she used to watch a lot of soap operas when she was younger, and spirit would use those references, you know, like one time somebody had come to her for a reading, and she could see that they had cancer because they were showing her a character from a soap opera who had cancer. And when you're saying to people that you're clairvoyant, they imagine, you know, that you see their loved one standing in front of them. It's not always that. It's, you know, it's just seeing something that gives you the reference point that you need.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be so beautiful. And I know TJ Higgs has got a lot. She had a difficult life earlier on, so she's probably got all of those references, the human condition to draw upon. And I did a demonstration mediumship recently, and I had this lady's, I'm not sure, I can't remember the exact details, but it was something like a lady in the spirit world, and she was showing me a butterfly had landed on the back of a hand, because I was doing this with my hand. For those who are listening on the audio and watching on YouTube, I'm basically touching my fingers of my right hand onto the back of my left hand here. So that's what she was doing in my mind's eye. So I was like, have you had a butterfly land on the back of your hand? And she said, she always sends me butterflies as a sign that she's around. I said, okay. I said, but this is something else. Has one landed on the back of your hand? And she said, no, it hasn't. And I said, well, she's doing this. Because the girl in the spirit world was deaf. She was a deaf girl. And I have learned British Sign Language. And I said, let me see what this is, because she's doing a sign. I said, oh, it's the sign for Christmas. This is what this is, the sign for Christmas. She passes at Christmas. Yes, she passed at Christmas. So that was beautiful. Wow. Frame of reference that they could use from my sign language lessons from years ago. And that was very useful in that moment. So, yeah, really beautiful.
And that's amazing. And, you know, that the spirit knew that you had this knowledge of sign language. You know,
yes.
it's all validation, isn't it? It's just
yes.
all validation. Because if a spirit came to me with sign language, I wouldn't have a clue. So I think that's great. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And thank you so much for giving us your time today. I'm going to put the link to your website in the description box attached. You will find Anne's podcast, all the details of her courses, and I'm sure your upcoming courses will be on there as well. And, you know, so if you're interested in doing any of those, please get in contact with Anne. And we'd love to have you back on the podcast again at some date in the future, because it's just so interesting chatting with you.
Oh, Sandie, thank you so much. That's so great. And just one thing I wanted to just add at the end is, when I said earlier about that's the reason I started my podcast, because there was no training and no internet years ago. Just my podcast is called Psychic Matters, and I interview people like Tony Stockwell, like Sandie Byrne, experts from across the world, to bring their guidance and their advice and their spiritual wealth to people who don't have that kind of education. So that's why I started it. So yeah, and listen, it's been wonderful talking to you, Sandie. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your fabulous podcast as well. It's been brilliant.
An absolute pleasure. So guys, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode of Life After Life. So until then, take care and stay safe.
Discussing everything about the afterlife and spirit world.